I want to begin on this Easter morning by naming something that I think many of us feel but rarely say out loud in church. We're tired. And I'm speaking in particular to those who live here in the Washington, D.C. area. We are a particular kind of tired, not regular tired. DC tired. The kind that comes from living at the center of things, where every news alert lands differently, where what happens at the White House or in Capitol Hill isn't something we watch from a distance, it's something we breathe with our colleagues, on our commute, in our dinner conversations. DC tired is the low-grade adrenaline that never fully subsides. I know we have some folks from out of town. I don't know about you, still speaking to the locals for a moment, but when I travel outside of DC, I notice that it feels different. Many Americans in other cities can look away from the madness, at least for a while. That's harder for us here. We're inside of it. The machinery of national power is our neighbor. And that machinery has been running full speed. So it's okay to acknowledge that mixed in with our joyful alleluias this morning is this pervading uncertainty about our country these days, which has made us tired. Not defeated, not unfaithful, just DC tired. There's a word in the story we just heard that refers to this. The word is Jerusalem. Jerusalem, the center, the place where decisions are made, where power lives, where the noise is loudest, the city toward which everything points and from which everything flows. And here's what Jerusalem does to you if you live there long enough. It becomes the whole world. It's very hard from inside Jerusalem to remember that there is anything outside it. And that is a form of trouble. It's not trouble of bad intentions. Most of us have very good intentions, but it's this trouble of distraction, of mistaking the center for the whole. And here's where it gets specific, because right now, from within our version of Jerusalem, false stories are being told and funded and legislated about trans people, about immigrants, about whose lives are sacred and whose testimony counts. The guards in Matthew's gospel were paid in silver to spread a story that Jesus' disciples stole his body in the middle of the night. The currency has changed today, but the dynamic has not. There's a version of this that lives closer to home, too. And in educated circles, including, let's be honest, some corners of the Episcopal Church, there is a respectable way of acknowledging Jesus without actually believing in the resurrection. Jesus as a great teacher, as a prophet, as a figure of remarkable moral courage. The resurrection, well, that's really metaphorical. A way of saying that his influence endured, that love is stronger than death. My friends, that is also a false story. It's not a mean-spirited one, but it's the same stories that the powers of death have always preferred. the one that keeps the stone securely in place. Reduce resurrection to an inspiring idea, and nothing is disturbed. No one has to change direction. No one has to go anywhere. Jerusalem remains Jerusalem, and the sinner remains the whole. It's easy to condemn this when it's happening out there. The more unsettling thing is when it's happening in us. That is the particular trouble of living here in Jerusalem. And it is the trouble that Easter aims exactly to address. Some of you were here last Sunday when we sat together at the sealed tomb. This morning, we go back. It's very early. The sun hasn't risen. 2 women make their way to a grave, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. Matthew tells us that they went simply to see the tomb, to witness, to be present to what has happened, even now that it is over. The powers, meanwhile, they've taken every precaution. That stone is in place. The seal is official. The soldiers are there and they are armed. This is not a careless operation, it is deliberate. The religious authorities had gone to Pilate the day before and said, "Secure the tomb." They knew what Jesus had said. They knew what might be claimed. They were not going to leave anything to chance. So that stone was sealed shut. Soldiers were posted to keep watch. That is the apparatus of death, arranged with the utmost care. But then the earth shakes, an angel descends, and his appearance is like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. And the guards, these armed men of the empire, shake and become like dead men. The stone is rolled back, not to let Jesus out, but so that the women can see in. The women, they're afraid, of course. But Matthew says something remarkable. They left the tomb with fear and great joy. Not fear and then joy, not fear that was replaced by joy, but fear and great joy both at once, neither canceling the other. The joy is great. It's qualified. The fear, it's just real. It is the joy that moves their feet. The powers of death deployed everything they had, but it was not enough. Now consider the guards for another moment. Armed, officially sanctioned, a Roman mandate behind them. They were sent to secure death and to keep it in place. And when the angel descended, they shook, became like dead men, Matthew says. So, you see, the ones who guard the dead become death-like. And the ones who came to grieve the dead left running with great joy. The women didn't bring anything with them to the tomb, unlike in some other versions. They didn't bring their right credentials, or a petition, or a strategic plan for removing the stone, or a continuing resolution to fund the operation till the end of the fiscal year. They came simply to grieve, because that was the only thing left to do. And so here we encounter the first grace of Easter morning, that God moves first, always, and especially when we arrive with nothing but our grief and nowhere else to go. The stone was not rolled away when the women arrived and asked nicely. It was not rolled away when the disciples showed up to organize everything. There were no disciples. There was an earthquake and an angel, and the stone was already moved before any human being had done any single thing to deserve it or prepare for it. The grace of Easter had already gone before them. The good news for us here who might be a little DC tired, perhaps a little uncertain, is that you did not need to arrive here this morning with the right amount of belief. The stone was already gone before you got here. But then the angel says something even more incredible. He is not here. He's not here. He's not in the tomb, not in Jerusalem, where the authorities imagine that they can still manage the aftermath. He's not here. He's already gone ahead. Go to Galilee, the angel tells the women. There you will see him. But then Jesus himself appears and says the same thing. Tell my disciples to go to Galilee, twice, insistently, as if the risen Christ doesn't want to leave any misunderstanding of where we are to find him. Christ, it turns out, is not waiting at the center of things. Christ has already gone ahead to Galilee. That is not incidental geography. New Testament scholar Warren Carter points out that Galilee is where it all began, where Jesus lived among fisher folk, among the sick, among people the empire had written off. It's a place that doesn't make it in the news, that Jerusalem barely cares about, and it is precisely where the risen Christ is already waiting. The risen Christ does not rehabilitate Jerusalem. He relocates the action, which means the answer, the Easter answer, is not manage Jerusalem better, get smarter, stay more informed, fight harder to take back the sinner. The Easter answer is turn around. The risen Christ is not behind the sealed stone, and he is not at the center of power. He's gone ahead to the margins, and he is waiting there. The commission is simply to follow. So to everyone who came this morning, regardless whether you're local, you're visiting, the Easter message is the same: to go to Galilee. This is not a retreat from the world. It's not surrender, because that is where the risen Christ already is, and where our actual lives, the lives that we can touch and shape and love, waiting for us. When I am traveling and I tell people I live in DC, I always get the wince. Poor you. And I quickly say, yes, but Washington, D.C. is a city with neighborhoods, farmers markets, neighbors who will wave back to you from across the street. This city has a small town feel if you know where to look. And that is where Galilee begins for us. That is where the risen Christ has already gone, not to the White House, not to Capitol Hill, to the places where life is actually lived. And we know that some parts of Galilee are more Galilee-like than others. Yeah. The neighbors who come to Charlie's place for a meal and a moment of dignity and a relationship that says, you are known here. Our neighbors who are afraid to go to the grocery store or walk their kids to school because immigration enforcement has been spotted nearby. The neighbors who have to choose increasingly between putting food on the table or having the power turned off. These are the corners of the city that Jerusalem barely notices. And that is where the risen Christ is. I'm almost done. wanted to share something our bishop, Marianne Buddy, said in her message on Maundy, Thursday evening. I've not been able to forget it. She was speaking about a painful season with her grandchildren when they were distant and dismissive. And it really bothered her, so she took it to prayer. And the question that came back was, well, does my love for them depend on them loving me back? And of course, the answer was no. And so once she named it, she said her task became clear. Take herself out of the center. Make peace with the background. Watch for where love could be expressed and received. And then she said this, in all candor, this is how I feel in my love for our country right now. I honestly don't know where we are headed as a people, and there are days when I feel such sadness. Yet I feel called to persevere in love, to remain on the side of love, and not to succumb to cynicism or despair. My friends, that is Galilee. That is the commission. The risen Christ is not asking us to keep guard or secure any tombs. He's asking us to turn around away from the sinner where our attention has been white-knuckling it, to go where he has already gone ahead, to our neighborhoods, to the people outside our doors who have nowhere else to go. This may feel like a smaller thing than the national stakes that we keep track of. It is not a smaller thing. It is exactly the thing. And as it turns out, it is, I believe, the antidote to DC tired. Not withdrawal from the world, but a different kind of faithfulness. Galilee was where resurrection life was breaking through all along, and the risen Christ knew that before any of us did. So come. The stone is already gone. You do not have to arrive with the right amount of faith or a perfect plan or the certainty even that your love will be received. You just have to go with fear and great joy and trust that Christ is going ahead of you. Alleluia, Christ is risen. Christ is risen indeed. Alleluia. Amen.